The story of civilization began not with a whisper, but with a cosmic explosion. 3 billion years ago, in the primordial soup of Earth's infancy, we existed as nothing more than microscopic atoms drifting in the planetary Petri dish, unaware of the empire we would one day build. Fast forward through the mists of deep time to 6 million years ago, and the first hominids emerged from the African savanna, our primate ancestors taking their first uncertain steps toward destiny. By 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus, equipped with larger brains and an insatiable curiosity, became the first to abandon the motherland, spreading across continents like wildfire across dry grass. Then, 400,000 years ago, the Neanderthals appeared, their robust bodies carved by ice and cold, faces almost disturbingly human, thriving in the frozen landscapes of Europe and Asia. And then came us, Homo sapiens, the last one standing, the survivors. But survival wasn't enough. We wanted more. We wanted immortality, order, dominance over the chaos of nature itself. The question echoes through the corridors of time. How did a fragile species of hairless apes conquer the entire world through the mechanism we call civilization? Our answer begins in the sun-scorched valley of Mesopotamia, 4000 BCE, where two great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, cradle humanity's first gamble with destiny, the city of Uruk. Here, on the banks of these life-giving waters, something revolutionary occurred. Our nomadic ancestors, who had survived for millennia by hunting swift gazelles and gathering wild berries, made a choice that would change the human body forever. They stopped wandering. They stopped following the herds. Instead, they bent down to the earth and learned to cultivate it, developing techniques to harvest cereal grains, wheat and barley from the rich alluvial soil. But this wasn't simple. Processing these grains into edible sustenance demanded backbreaking innovation. Using primitive hand mills, two grinding stones pressed together with raw human strength, the people of Uruk crushed grain into flour, collecting it in clay containers for storage. Hour after hour, day after day, they ground their future into existence, one handful of grain at a time. This was agriculture. This was the birth of civilization. No longer would we chase our food across endless plains. No longer would we depend on the whims of nature's bounty. Through human ingenuity, we created our own food source, our own security, our own tomorrow. Uruk exploded into a metropolis of over 50,000 souls, a staggering concentration of humanity that the world had never witnessed. But evolution demands payment, and the cost was written in our very bones. The average male height plummeted from a robust 5 feet 9 inches to a diminished 5 feet 3. Women shrank from 5 feet 3 to barely 5 feet tall. We transformed from the super athletes of the Paleolithic, lean, powerful, capable of running down prey across vast distances, into smaller, frielier, landlocked farmers tethered to our fields. Our bodies weakened as our minds sharpened. Our legs shortened as our cities grew taller. We had traded freedom for security, mobility for stability, the open horizon for the furrows of the field. And in that exchange, we changed the very essence of what it meant to be human. Chapter 1. The First Builders and Lawmakers. As Uruk flourished along the Mesopotamian floodplains, something darker took root beneath the abundance. The surplus grain that once promised liberation became the currency of control. Those who managed the granaries, the priests, the administrators, the early bureaucrats, discovered that food storage meant power storage. They didn't need to swing swords or hurl spears. They simply controlled who ate and who starved. The world's first social hierarchy wasn't born from violence, but from wheat. The Sumerian experiment spread like a virus of ambition. City-states erupted across the Fertile Crescent, Lagash, Eridu, each competing to build higher temples, deeper irrigation channels, more elaborate systems of control. Farmers who once answered only to the seasons now answered to kings who claimed divine mandate. The ziggurat towers rose toward the heavens, massive step pyramids where priests performed rituals to ensure the gods would bless the harvest. But the real miracle wasn't happening in the temples. It was happening in the accounting houses, where scribes etched the first written language into clay tablets, recording debts, trades, and ownership. Writing wasn't invented for poetry or love letters. It was invented for taxes. Meanwhile, along the banks of the Nile, the Egyptians took humanity's obsession with permanence to an extreme that bordered on madness. Death terrified them, so they declared war on it. The Pharaohs, god-kings wrapped in gold and linen, commissioned monuments so massive that they would force the future to remember them. The Great Pyramids of Giza rose stone by stone, each block weighing as much as a modern car, dragged by armies of workers who believed they were building stairways to eternity. The pharaohs filled their tombs with everything they'd need in the afterlife: food, furniture, servants rendered in painted limestone, even their internal organs preserved in canopic jars. They mummified their bodies with such meticulous care that we can still see their faces 4,000 years later, frozen in the moment between life and whatever comes after. Far to the east, in the Indus Valley, a different kind of civilization was quietly achieving what others only dreamed of. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro didn't build towering monuments or golden death masks. Instead, they built something far more revolutionary: functional urban planning. Every house connected to an advanced drainage system. Public baths gleamed with engineering precision. Streets ran in perfect grids. While Egypt obsessed over death and Sumeria obsessed over control, the Indus Valley civilization obsessed over something almost mundane: clean water. They understood that civilization's true foundation wasn't spirituality or military might. It was sanitation. But it was Hammurabi of Babylon who finally codified what all these experiments have been building toward. Around 1750 BCE, he erected a black stone pillar inscribed with 282 laws, humanity's first comprehensive legal code. The message was brutally clear: civilization required order, and order required inequality baked into law. If a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye, the code declared. Justice as mirror, punishment as equivalent exchange. But the code also enshrined class divisions with surgical precision. If a nobleman killed a commoner slave, he paid a fine. If a commoner struck a nobleman, he lost his hands. The law wasn't blind. It could see exactly who you were and what you were worth. This was the bargain civilization offered: security in exchange for freedom, abundance in exchange for equality, immortality in exchange for everything that once made us wild. And we took it. Every time. Chapter 2: The Age of Philosophy and the Sword. While Mesopotamia and Egypt wrestled with mortality and law across the vast eastern expanse, China was inventing something far more dangerous than any weapon: a justification for absolute power wrapped in cosmic inevitability. The Xia dynasty emerged from legend around 2070 BCE, claiming descent from the gods themselves. But it was the Zhou dynasty that perfected the ultimate political innovation: the mandate of heaven. The concept was elegant in its brutality. The emperor didn't rule because of bloodline or military strength alone. He ruled because the cosmos itself had chosen him. Heaven watched, heaven judged, and heaven could revoke its blessing at any moment through floods, famines, or rebellions. If you succeeded in overthrowing the emperor, it wasn't treason. It was proof that heaven had already withdrawn its mandate. The system justified both absolute obedience and revolutionary violence in the same breath, creating a cycle of dynasties rising and falling like tides, each one claiming divine right until the rivers flooded and the peasants starved and heaven changed its mind again. Meanwhile, on the sun-scorched shores of the Aegean Sea, the Greeks were conducting a different experiment entirely, one that would haunt human politics for millennia. They shattered the ancient model of god-kings and divine mandates, replacing it with something radical: the city-state, small enough that citizens could actually know each other's names. But even among these revolutionary polities, two models emerged that couldn't have been more different. Sparta transformed itself into a military machine so efficient it bordered on inhuman. Boys were ripped from their mothers at age 7 and subjected to the agoge, brutal training that turned children into weapons. Spartan warriors became legends. Their shields inscribed would come back with this or on it. Their society stripped of everything soft or beautiful in service of perfect martial discipline. They feared change so much they banned money and art, freezing themselves in amber while the world evolved around them. Athens chose a different poison. They invented democracy, rule by the people. But the people meant only free adult males, excluding women, slaves, and foreigners who actually made up the majority of the population. Still, what they created was revolutionary. The assembly where any citizen could speak, where rhetoric and reason could sway thousands, where Socrates could question everything until they gave him a hemlock to shut him up. The Athenians built the Parthenon, birthed philosophy, theater, and mathematics. But they were also viciously paranoid, executing their own generals for winning battles the wrong way, condemning their greatest minds for asking uncomfortable questions. Then came Alexander, the Macedonian prince who learned philosophy from Aristotle and warfare from his father Philip. At 20, he inherited an army. By 32, he had conquered the known world, crushing Persia, claiming Egypt as pharaoh, pushing east until his soldiers reached the Indus River and mutinied. They had followed him to the edge of the world, but India broke him. The war elephants, the monsoons, the exhaustion. His men refused to march another step. Alexander wept, realizing that even unlimited ambition has a border, that conquest eventually meets something it cannot digest. He died soon after in Babylon, 32 years old, master of an empire that would fracture the moment he stopped breathing. The sword could only conquer so far, but the ideas, democracy, philosophy, the mandate of heaven, those would cut deeper and last longer than any blade. Chapter 3. The Roman Colossus. Rome began with fratricide and never quite outgrew it. The legend claims twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, abandoned as infants and nursed by a she-wolf, founded the city in 753 BCE. But when they argued over which hill to build on, Romulus solved the dispute by killing his brother and naming the city after himself. This was Rome's origin story: power born from blood, ambition trumping kinship, one vision imposed through violence. From that first murder, Rome grew into something that would make Alexander's empire look like a practice run. The Romans didn't just conquer. They absorbed, they built, they systematized. They transformed conquest into infrastructure. Roads that still carry traffic 2,000 years later. Aqueducts that made cities possible in deserts. A legal code that would become the foundation of Western law. For centuries, Rome functioned as a republic. Power distributed among senators, consuls elected by citizens, a complex machinery of checks and balances designed to prevent any one man from becoming king. But republics are fragile things, and ambition is patient. Julius Caesar, a general who conquered Gaul and wrote his own propaganda, crossed the Rubicon River with his army in 49 BCE, an act of treason so brazen it became the metaphor for the point of no return. He seized Rome, declared himself dictator for life, and the senators who still believed in the Republic stabbed him 23 times on the Senate floor. But it was too late. His adopted son Octavian would become Augustus, the first emperor, and the Republic would never breathe again. Rome had traded democracy for efficiency, freedom for order, and the machine would run for 500 more years. Then, In an obscure province called Judea, a carpenter's son began preaching about love, forgiveness, and a kingdom not of this world. The Romans crucified him like they crucified thousands of others, criminals, rebels, anyone who threatened Pax Romana. But this execution backfired spectacularly. Christianity spread like wildfire through the underclass, the slaves, the disenfranchised, offering something Rome's cold efficiency could never provide: hope beyond the grave, equality before God, meaning in suffering. By 313 CE, Emperor Constantine, recognizing both a genuine vision and a brilliant political opportunity, legalized Christianity. By the end of the century, it was the state religion. The empire that killed Christ now worshipped him, transforming a revolutionary peasant movement into the establishment itself. But Rome was rotting from within. The empire had grown too large, too complex, too corrupt. Emperors were murdered by their own guards. Inflation destroyed the currency. The borders hemorrhaged under pressure from Germanic tribes, Visigoths, Vandals, Ostrogoths, pushed westward by the even more terrifying Huns, nomadic warriors from the Asian steppes. In 410 CE, Alaric and his Visigoths sacked Rome itself. The first time in 800 years that the Eternal City had fallen to a foreign enemy. 70 years later, the last Western Roman emperor, a boy ironically named Romulus after the founder, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer. The Colossus collapsed, not with a bang, but with a bureaucratic whimper, buried under its own weight, devoured by the very barbarians it had once dismissed as primitive. The light of classical civilization flickered and went dark. Europe descended into what would later be called the Dark Ages. Though in the East, Byzantium would keep the flame burning for another 1,000 years, a reminder that Rome's ghost was harder to kill than Rome itself. Chapter 4. The Middle Ages, Faith and Fragmentation. While Europe stumbled through its Dark Age, the Arabian Peninsula exploded with revelation. In 610 CE, a merchant named Muhammad retreated to a cave outside Mecca and emerged claiming the angel Gabriel had spoken to him, delivering the final word of God. Islam, submission to the divine will, unified the fractured Arab tribes under one uncompromising message: there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. What began as a spiritual awakening became a conquest that would reshape 3 continents. Within a century of Muhammad's death in 632, Islamic armies had swept across the Middle East, swallowed Persia, claimed North Africa, and crossed into Spain. The Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates built empires that rivaled Rome at its height, but they didn't just conquer, they preserved. While Christian Europe burned books and forgot Greek philosophy, Islamic scholars translated Aristotle, advanced mathematics, perfected astronomy, and invented algebra. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad became the intellectual center of the world, proving that civilization hadn't died. It had simply moved east. Back in the European wreckage, a Frankish warlord named Charlemagne decided to resurrect the ghost of Rome through sheer force of will. By 800 CE, he had conquered most of Western Europe and convinced the Pope to crown him emperor, creating what would be called the Holy Roman Empire. Though, as Voltaire would later quip, it was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. But Charlemagne's dream of unified Christian Europe died with him, his empire fragmenting among squabbling grandsons. Then came the Vikings, Norse raiders and longships who burst from Scandinavia like a recurring nightmare. They pillaged monasteries, sacked cities, traded slaves, and terrified Christian Europe for 3 centuries. Yet these same raiders would settle Normandy, discover Iceland and Greenland, and reach North America 500 years before Columbus. They were pirates, explorers, and merchants all at once, proving that civilization's borders were always more fluid than its builders wanted to admit. From this chaos emerged feudalism, a system so brutally practical it would define medieval life for centuries. Society stratified into rigid layers. At the bottom, serfs, peasants bound to the land like livestock, working fields they would never own in exchange for protection they rarely received. Above them, knights, warriors who sold their swords to lord in exchange for land and status, bound by oaths of loyalty and codes of chivalry that sounded noble but usually just meant don't murder other nobles. At the top, lords and kings who claimed divine right to rule while constantly betraying each other in an endless game of thrones where loyalty was a currency nobody could afford. The feudal contract was simple. The weak traded their freedom for protection, and the strong traded protection for labor and obedience. Everyone knew their place. Everyone understood the deal. And if you were born a serf, you died a serf. And so would your children and their children forever. The Middle Ages weren't dark because learning disappeared. They were dark because freedom did, replaced by a system that turned human beings into resources, where your value was determined at birth, and questioning the order meant damnation, both earthly and eternal. Chapter 5. Crusades, Cons, and Cathedrals. In 1095, Pope Urban II stood before a crowd in Clermont, France, and ignited a holy war that would rage for 2 centuries. Jerusalem, sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, had fallen under Islamic control, and Urban declared it an abomination that demanded correction through blood. Deus vult, the crowd roared. God wills it. The Crusades were sold as pilgrimages, but they were invasions wrapped in religious fervor, waves of European knights crashing against the Levant in the name of Christ. The First Crusade succeeded through sheer brutality, sacking Jerusalem in 1099 and slaughtering thousands. Muslims, Jews, even Eastern Christians, until the streets ran ankle-deep in blood, according to the Chronicles. But each successive crusade accomplished less and cost more, draining European treasuries and lives while achieving nothing permanent. Saladin would reclaim Jerusalem. The Fourth Crusade would betray its mission entirely, sacking Constantinople, a Christian city, for plunder. The Crusades didn't unite Christianity. They exposed its fractures, proved that faith could justify any atrocity, and taught both sides that the other was irredeemably savage. The collision of civilizations didn't produce understanding. It produced centuries of mutual hatred. While Christians and Muslims fought over desert cities, something far more terrifying was taking shape on the Mongolian steppes. Genghis Khan, born Temujin, a child who watched his father poisoned and his family abandoned, united the fractious Mongol tribes through a combination of military genius and ruthless pragmatism. He didn't care about your religion, your culture, or your noble bloodline. He cared whether you would submit or die. By his death in 1227, the Mongol Empire stretched from Korea to the Caspian Sea, the largest contiguous land empire in human history. His descendants would push further into China, Russia, the Middle East, creating a network of trade and terror that connected East and West like never before. The Mongols killed millions, razed entire cities, built pyramids of skulls as warnings. But they also enforced the Pax Mongolica, protecting the Silk Road and allowing ideas, technologies, and diseases to flow freely across Eurasia. They were civilization's nightmare and its accidental midwife, proving that empires could be built on mobility and terror rather than cities and agriculture. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, civilizations were rising that Europe didn't even know existed. The Maya had already peaked centuries earlier, building astronomical observatories and developing a calendar more accurate than Europe's, their cities swallowed by jungle after a mysterious collapse. The Aztecs built Tenochtitlan on a lake in the Valley of Mexico, a city of 200,000 that rivaled any European capital, sustained by tribute, trade, and human sacrifice on a scale that shocked even the Spanish conquistadors who would destroy it. They believed the sun required blood to rise each morning, so they fed it thousands of beating hearts carved from living chests atop pyramid temples. In West Africa, the Mali Empire flourished under Musa Musa, whose pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 was so lavish, distributing so much gold along the way, that he crashed the Mediterranean economy for years. He returned to build libraries, mosques, and the University of Timbuktu, transforming his capital into a center of Islamic learning that rivaled Baghdad. The world was far larger and stranger than any crusader imagined. Empires rose and fell on every continent, each convinced it was the center of everything, none aware how small their stage truly was. Chapter 6: Renaissance, Plague, and Discovery. In 1347, merchant ships limped into Sicilian harbors carrying more than silk and spices. They carried death. The Black Death, bubonic plague carried by fleas on rats, swept across Europe like God's own judgment, killing somewhere between 1/3 and half of the entire population within 5 years. Villages were abandoned mid-meal, corpses rotted in the streets, and the living envied the dead. Priests who urged prayer died alongside the sinners they condemned. The plague didn't discriminate by faith or class. It simply killed, revealing that God either didn't care or wasn't listening. But catastrophe breeds opportunity. With half the workforce dead, the survivors discovered something radical. Their labor had value. Serfs who had been treated as disposable suddenly found themselves in demand. Lords who once commanded absolute obedience now had to negotiate, offer wages, grant freedoms. The plague shattered feudalism's iron grip, not through revolution, but through mathematics. When labor becomes scarce, workers gain power. The Black Death was an apocalypse, but it accidentally planted the seeds of workers' rights, proving that sometimes civilization advances through collapse. From the ashes of plague-ravaged Europe emerged something extraordinary. The Renaissance, a cultural explosion so vibrant it still defines our conception of genius. Leonardo da Vinci dissected corpses to understand anatomy, designed flying machines centuries before flight was possible, and painted the Mona Lisa with a smile that still haunts us. Michelangelo carved David from a single block of marble and painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling on his back, creating images of God and Adam so powerful they became the default visual language of creation itself. Meanwhile, Niccolò Machiavelli watched Italian city-states tear each other apart and wrote The Prince, a manual for power so brutally honest about human nature that his name became synonymous with cunning and ruthlessness. He understood what the Renaissance proved, that humans could create beauty and horror with equal brilliance, that genius and cruelty often share the same skull. Then in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west looking for India and stumbled into a hemisphere that Europeans didn't know existed. He called the inhabitants Indians because he died refusing to admit his mistake. What followed was genocide dressed as destiny. Hernán Cortés landed in Mexico in 1519 with a few hundred men and toppled the Aztec Empire within 2 years, not through superior warfare alone, but through smallpox, political alliances with tribes who hated the Aztecs, and the Aztecs' own fatal hesitation. Moctezuma initially believed Cortés might be the returning god Quetzalcoatl. By the time he realized his mistake, Tenochtitlan was burning. In Peru, Francisco Pizarro captured the Inca Emperor Atahualpa, accepted a room filled with gold as ransom, then executed him anyway. Two of the Americas' greatest empires, civilizations that had flourished for centuries, collapsed within a generation of European contact. The Renaissance celebrated human potential while simultaneously demonstrating humanity's capacity for destruction. Europe rediscovered classical learning, created unprecedented art, and used that knowledge to perfect the art of conquest. They built cathedrals and enslaved ships, painted Madonnas, and funded genocide, proving that enlightenment and atrocity could coexist comfortably in the same civilization, the same century, the same human heart. Chapter 7: Revolution and Enlightenment. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther nailed 95 complaints to a church door in Wittenberg and accidentally shattered Christian unity forever. He was furious about indulgences, the Catholic Church's practice of selling forgiveness, charging coin for reduced time in purgatory, turning salvation into a business model. Luther argued that faith alone, not papal authority or purchase pardons, determined your relationship with God. The Pope excommunicated him. Luther burned the excommunication letter. What began as theological dispute exploded into the Protestant Reformation, fracturing Christianity into Catholic and Protestant camps that would slaughter each other for the next century. In England, King Henry VIII broke from Rome entirely, not over doctrine, but because the Pope refused to annul his marriage. Henry declared himself head of the Church of England, seized monastery lands, and proved that religious revolution could be driven by lust and greed as easily as by faith. The Reformation didn't purify Christianity, it weaponized it, giving every prince and king theological justification to wage war, persecute heretics, and claim God's blessing on their particular brand of power. Across the Atlantic, Britain's American colonies grew tired of funding an empire that treated them as revenue streams rather than citizens. No taxation without representation became the rallying cry of merchants and plantation owners who wanted the profits of empire without its obligations. In 1776, they declared independence with words that would echo through history. All men are created equal, endowed with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The hypocrisy was staggering. Many of the men who wrote those words owned slaves, and all men conspicuously excluded women, natives, and anyone without property. But the idea was revolutionary nonetheless. They won their war against the world's most powerful military, established a republic with elected representatives and checks on power, and created a constitution that, despite its flaws and compromises, became a template for democratic movements worldwide. America proved that colonies could become nations, that monarchies weren't inevitable, that people could govern themselves without kings or emperors claiming divine mandate. Then France tried the same thing and nearly drowned in blood. In 1789, starving peasants stormed the Bastille while nobles danced at Versailles, igniting a revolution that promised liberty, equality, and fraternity. They executed King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, abolished the monarchy, and declared a republic. But revolution devours its own. Maximilien Robespierre, a lawyer who genuinely believed in virtue, established the Committee of Public Safety and inaugurated the Reign of Terror. The guillotine became the symbol of revolutionary justice, its blade falling on aristocrats, priests, moderates, and eventually the revolutionaries themselves. Robespierre sent thousands to their deaths for insufficient revolutionary zeal before the terror consumed him too. He was guillotined in 1794, silenced by the same machine he had perfected. The French Revolution proved that killing kings doesn't guarantee freedom, that replacing one tyranny with another is frighteningly easy, and that the road to hell isn't just paved with good intentions. Sometimes it's built entirely from them. The Enlightenment promised reason would liberate humanity from superstition and tyranny. Instead, it gave humanity new reasons to kill each other, more efficient methods of execution, and revolutions that ate their children while preaching brotherhood. Chapter 8: The Industrial World and Total War. The Industrial Revolution transformed labor from human muscle to mechanical power, and in the smoke-choked factories of Manchester and Birmingham. A German philosopher named Karl Marx watched children work 16-hour shifts and saw not progress, but exploitation. In 1848, he published the Communist Manifesto, declaring that history was a class struggle between those who owned the means of production and those who sold their labor to survive. "Workers of the world, unite," he thundered. "You have nothing to lose but your chains." His vision promised a world without class, without money, without states. A workers' paradise achieved through revolution. What it delivered was gulags, purges, and authoritarian regimes that claimed to speak for the proletariat while silencing them with bullets. But Marx had diagnosed something real. Industrialization created wealth on an unprecedented scale while concentrating it in fewer and fewer hands. And the workers who built that wealth lived in squalor while their bosses built mansions. Meanwhile, European powers looked at maps of Africa and saw only blank spaces waiting to be filled with their flags. The scramble for Africa was colonialism refined to its purest, most efficient form. At the Berlin Conference of 1884, European leaders literally carved up an entire continent without a single African representative in the room. They drew borders with rulers, splitting ethnic groups, forcing enemies together, extracting resources, and calling it civilization. Belgium's King Leopold turned the Congo into his personal slave plantation, killing 10 million people in the process. Britain, France, Germany, Italy, they all participated, claiming they were bringing progress and Christianity while looting gold, diamonds, rubber, and human dignity. Then in 1914, the industrial powers turned their mechanized efficiency on each other. World War I began with an assassination in Sarajevo and metastasized into a meat grinder that devoured an entire generation. Trench warfare, poison gas, machine guns, industrial killing on an assembly line scale. 16 million dead. The Ottoman Empire, which had endured for 6 centuries, collapsed. The Austro-Hungarian Empire shattered into fragments. The map of Europe was redrawn in blood, and the Treaty of Versailles imposed such crushing terms on Germany that it guaranteed another war was coming. 20 years later, Adolf Hitler, a failed artist nursing grievances and racial fantasies, rose to power promising to restore German greatness. He blamed Jews, communists, and the weak for Germany's humiliation, and enough Germans believed him to hand him absolute power. World War II made the first one look restrained. Hitler invaded Poland, France, the Soviet Union, determined to build a 1,000-year Reich through conquest and genocide. The Holocaust systematically murdered 6 million Jews in death camps designed for industrial-scale extermination. Gas chambers, crematoriums, bureaucracy applied to mass murder. The war killed 70 million people, devastated entire continents, and ended with a weapon that changed warfare forever. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another in Nagasaki. In seconds, cities vanished, vaporized by unleashed atoms. The same atoms that had drifted in Earth's primordial soup, now weaponized into civilization-ending power. Humanity had achieved what pharaohs and emperors only dreamed of, the ability to destroy the world. We had become gods, and gods holding apocalypse in our trembling hands. Chapter 9. The Modern Era and the Eternal Cycle. The atomic age should have ended war, but instead it perfected the art of almost war. The United States and Soviet Union emerged from World War II as superpowers, each armed with enough nuclear weapons to extinguish human civilization multiple times over, locked in a Cold War where direct conflict meant mutual annihilation. So they fought through proxies, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, turning smaller nations into chess pieces in an ideological struggle between capitalism and communism. The world balanced on the edge of apocalypse for 40 years, held back only by the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, an acronym that spelled MAD and meant exactly what it said. We survived not through wisdom, but through fear, discovering that the only thing that stops God from destroying the world is the certainty they'll die with it. But the Cold War also drove a different kind of conquest. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, a metal sphere that beeped as it orbited Earth, and the space race began. 12 years later, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon's surface, planting an American flag on a celestial body that humanity had worshipped, navigated by, and dreamed about for millennia. We had escaped Earth's gravity, fulfilled the ancient fantasy of touching the heavens. Yet even this achievement was rooted in competition and fear. The rockets that carried astronauts were modified missiles, each space program a demonstration of who could strike anywhere, including orbit. We reached for the stars with weapons in our other hand. Then came the digital revolution, transforming human connection more radically than the printing press or the telegraph. The first computers filled entire rooms and could barely calculate. Within decades, we carried supercomputers in our pockets, connecting billions of humans in an instantaneous global network. Information that once required libraries now loaded in milliseconds. The internet collapsed distance, democratized knowledge, and created new empires, not of land but of data, platforms, and algorithms. Tech billionaires accumulated wealth that would make pharaohs envious, building companies that shaped human behavior on a scale no emperor achieved. And yet, here we stand, with all our technological marvels, facing the same truth that Gilgamesh, the ancient Sumerian king who sought immortality and failed, discovered 4,000 years ago. The Epic of Gilgamesh, carved in cuneiform on clay tablets in the very same Mesopotamian valley where civilization began, ends with a realization that still echoes. Death is the share of man, and empire is the wind. Gilgamesh built walls, conquered cities, searched for eternal life, and discovered that mortality was the one enemy he could never defeat. We have split atoms and landed on the moon. We have mapped the human genome and connected every corner of the globe. But we have not escaped the cycle. Empires still rise, promising order, prosperity, permanence. And empires still fall, undermined by hubris, inequality, and time's patient erosion. The Sumerians, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Mongols, Ottomans, they all believed they would last forever. None did. We are still those atoms in the primordial soup, still the apes who learned to farm, still building towers to touch heaven and writing our names in stone hoping someone will remember. Technology changes. Human nature doesn't. The cycle continues. And perhaps that's not a tragedy. Perhaps that's just the share of man. To build, to dream, to fall, and to let others build again on our ruins. Forever reaching for immortality we will never achieve. Creating meaning in a universe that offers none. Passing the torch to the next generation of builders who will make the same mistakes, dream the same dreams, and leave their own bones for the desert to claim. The story of human civilization doesn't end. It just keeps beginning again.